How did you come to the project?
There was an article written by Buzz Bissinger in Vanity Fair. Buzz is a fantastic writer. And I had actually adapted him once before because I had done one of the drafts of Friday Night Lights.
Oh, okay.
So I knew his work well. And HBO optioned the article, hired me to write it. While I was writing it, the executives at HBO were all fired. So by the time I handed in the script, there was this new administration sitting there who hadn't ordered the script and didn't particularly care about it.
Right.
So it sat for 2 years. And at a certain point, it was right after Hart's War came out, I decided that it was time to find out if I was grown up enough to be a director. And it seemed like Shattered Glass was a good launching point for me because I knew there was nothing in there that was so craft dependent that my lack of experience was going to hang me. Mm-hmm. There was no car crash.
Right.
There was nothing blew up. Nobody shot anybody. There was no nudity.
It was technically doable.
There was no CGI. I mean,
right.
these things that I just have no idea how to do. I thought, okay, let's find out if I can direct for performance. Because it was really just a performance piece, just sort of a tone.
Had you had acting experience or in terms of acting classes, or how did you know how to talk to the actors?
I took acting class for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
In the 90s. Never to be an actor, because that really seemed like a tough hustle, just a miserable way to make a living. But I thought it would help my writing.
And did it?
Enormously. It helped me to get a lot more spare.
Right. And did that experience come back to help you on the set?
Absolutely. But I think the biggest payoff for me from acting class, and I would recommend it to anyone who directs, is that the first time I ever went to acting class, it was a Tuesday night class in the Valley at 7:30, and at about 2:30 that afternoon, I started to get this feeling in my stomach that I had not had since I was a kid who couldn't sleep away from home. It was like, oh my God, what is this?
Was it
like
a knot?
I couldn't eat, I could barely breathe. I was terrified. And I realize now it was the fear of going in front of strangers and looking stupid.
Right.
I couldn't quite diagnose it then. But what I found was, 4 years later, I still felt that way every Tuesday at 2:30. I would literally roll around for 5 hours waiting for that goddamn class to start. That feeling of anxiety never got better. And what it gave me was a sense of compassion for actors. And can I go up to Chloe Sevigny and say, I know what it's like to be an actor? Of course not.
No, but you know what
I can appreciate the risk.
What they go through despite,
Absolutely.
I think what we all have is a fear of public speaking or being in public. They make it go away and they just do their thing.
You know, before I write scripts, I sometimes get the same dream that I'm behind a curtain at the Improv, which is a comedy club, and they call my name. And I go stand in front of a microphone and there's a huge crowd out there and I just don't have any jokes.
Right.
And I've had that dream many times. Mm-hmm. We all have that terror that we're gonna be up on that stage and nothing smart's gonna come out.
Right.
Well, actors have to deal with that every take of every scene.
Right. Do you think Stephen Glass felt that pressure and that's why he, you know, it feels like there's a little bit of an analogy to draw there?
Oh yeah, and I think part of the reason why I was the right writer for that movie was because I understood Stephen Glass really well. You know, we all know what it is to want to get that pat on the head and be told that you're the smartest kid in the 3rd grade,
right.
You know? Hopefully you get to a point where your image of yourself isn't so tied into that that you stop functioning. I actually never got past that point, and I know Stephen never got past that point.
Right.
So I understood him really well.
Did you draw mostly from Bissinger's article? Did you meet the real players?
I met everybody except Stephen.
Okay. Because you didn't want to, or he didn't want to?
Oh no, he wouldn't talk to me.
He wouldn't talk.
We tried, and I think the overtures were taken seriously. We tried through his lawyer.
Sure.
But when I was writing the script, he didn't want to talk to me. And then by the time he wanted to talk to me, the movie was over, and there was no upside for me.
Right.
But I had everybody else. I had everybody else.
Have you ever heard from him since the movie was completed? Had he seen it? Or
I know he has seen it.
Okay.
He and I have never met. We've never spoken. I wish him well. I don't celebrate the fact that that movie caused him or his family pain. I don't feel great about that. It was sort of a necessary byproduct of that story.
For me anyway, watching it did what you'd think he'd want, which is I understood what happened and I felt for him, and that's an amazing accomplishment for a movie about that subject matter and that kind of character.
Yeah, I hope he feels that way. I don't know. I'm sure he'll be a screenwriter and one day he'll write a movie about me.
What was the most challenging part of writing that scene of confrontation? Was it more challenging than other scenes in the movie? Because
No,
it a slow boil, kind of up to that point, and then for lack of a better, this is a crass term, but that's
Sure.
the money shot. I mean, that scene is where it boils, and then boom, it's out in the open. And did you look at it like this is a very important scene?
Yes, I did look at it that way, not in terms of the writing, but in terms of the directing.
Okay.
That was a 28-day shoot, which means that every single day we were shooting 2 or 3 or 4 scenes.
In a way, that kind of schedule doesn't afford you a lot of soul searching.
Right, except that one scene was the only scene that we had an entire day for.
Smart.
It was the only scene, and I needed it because we spent the first half of that day, literally up until lunch, shooting The Master. We shot 14 takes of The Master, which was a world record for that movie. I mean, we never had time to do 14 takes of anything, but we had to there. And I hadn't figured out the rhythm of that scene until about take 12.
Right.
And then we spent the rest of the day getting coverage and trying to make the scene make sense. But there was no other scene that we took that kind of time on.
Was there any real life detail that you would have loved to have included in that, but that you couldn't? Did you leave anything out?
No, everything I knew about those two guys, I put in that movie.
Right.
I don't think, well, that's not true. That's not true. There were some quotes that I had, some Stephen Glass quotes, that I couldn't get double or triple confirmation on.
Okay.
So they didn't go in the movie. They would have been fantastic. They were salacious and great.
Right.
But if I couldn't meet the standards of journalism, I wasn't going to put it in the movie.
Did you, in terms of tone, did you write in things like the tone or the mood of how you feel when he's walking Stephen to the door? You know, how does the tone of that scene, can you convey that in a screenplay, and did you convey that in the screenplay?
You can. I have a couple rules about stage direction.
Okay.
I don't think it should editorialize. I have a personal rule, I never write stage direction that's more than 3 lines. I won't. Because when I read a script and I see like a big block of stage direction, I just want to get through it. I don't want to even know what's in there, and I resent the writer for not having the discipline to make the screenplay more readable. So I'm very careful about what I put in stage direction. And I'm sort of fanatical about how short a screenplay ought to be.
Right.
I want them to be as short as possible. Shadowglass was 102 pages.
So that's, you know, I've been in a corporate atmosphere a few times, and I've seen people escorted from buildings. I've seen people, and you know, it's very humiliating, and
Sure.
you know, sometimes they even have security do it just for
That's
extra
awful.
humiliation, and the poor person goes, "Can I at least get my Rolodex? Can I at least get my thing?"
Right.
And that tone that you capture, that kind of, you know, humiliation is really captured in that scene. And I was wondering if that was something you'd written into the screenplay, or you just brought that in the direction.
No, what that came from was spending a lot of time with Chuck Lane, the character that Peter Sarsgaard's playing, and having him walk me through it. I think the key thing is not being lazy when you're doing research on stuff like that. Get everything from those sources. Get every detail, whether you're going to use it or not. Chuck took me through that and took me through it line by line. There are lines in that movie that I couldn't make up.
Right. How wonderful.
They're just too good.
Your subject's a journalist, so he has a memory for lines and stuff.
He has a memory for lines, and he also was very keenly aware as he was going through that experience that he was going to have to answer for things, and he was going to have to remember things in a very specific way. That was to his own benefit, but it turned out to be to my great benefit.
Because he was firing a very popular employee.
Yeah, I mean, for the Chuck Lane character, what that movie is about is what would happen if the least popular kid in high school has to face off against the most popular kid in high school.
Right.
What does he do? You don't have to work at a magazine to understand the personal dynamics of something like that.
Right. Did you feel constrained at all having to stick to the real life events? Were there points where you wish you could have just, you know, flown free?
I don't think I ever seriously entertained that as a possibility. I found that having a true story gave me such a feeling of authenticity in telling the story, both writing it and directing it. It was such a blessing to have that level of detail and have it be real, so that the actors never felt like they were making anything up, and I never felt like I was making anything up.
Did you make up the Stephen Glass classroom visits, the return to his school?
Oh yeah, there's actually a story that's attached to that. That was not in the original script.
Okay.
In the original script, there was a different framing device for that movie. I always felt that movie needed some sort of narration. And in the original script, we cut to this huge ballroom, which was empty except for one table, and it was the aftermath of the Correspondents' Dinner, the DC Correspondents' Dinner. And all the people who had worked at the New Republic with Stephen Glass were sitting around this table, you know, with their bow ties loosened, and they direct addressed to camera. and told the story of Stephen Glass, and that was our narration
Like
device.
kind of Red style, a little bit?
Not dissimilar, not as good,
Okay.
but not dissimilar.
Right.
And we cut the movie together, and the studio hated the framing device. And to be honest with you, more than half the people who saw the movie didn't care for it. I liked it, but I was clearly in the minority.
Right.
So they wanted to strip the framing device out of the movie entirely, which I thought was a huge mistake. So I called a meeting with everyone at Lionsgate. This was, the people who ran the company, who paid for the movie and had given me my shot at directing for the
So you're being very respectful.
My debt to them was not a small one.
Sure.
And what I said was, I think we've got a good movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's going to blow anybody's doors off. I don't know what to say, except I'm sorry. I tried to get it there. I didn't. I apologize. But here's this new idea. And I think this will get it to the next level. And I pitched them, as well as Stephen Glass could pitch on his best day, I pitched them the idea of Stephen Glass going back to his high school journalism class and narrating his own story. And then it turning out to be that never took place.
Right.
And the hook of it was that it would leave the audience feeling like the people who work with Stephen Glass felt. Like, how much of this was real and how much of that was made up?
Right.
It took you into the world of Stephen Glass.
There he is on screen doing what he got caught at doing.
It turned out to be a really good idea. And it elevated the material substantially.
Right.
That's another one of those where I wish I had been smart enough to figure that out when I was writing the damn thing. And I've always cursed myself that I hadn't figured that out. It would have been a lot easier if I would have just gotten it right the first time.
Is that one of the advantages of being a writer-director?
Huge.
As a director, you'll shoot the movie, and then if you need to fix something, you're there to write what your solution is.
Absolutely. I think it's really easy to look at a movie once it's shot and see where its weaknesses are. And all it requires is just being honest with yourself. Like, I didn't get this right. Or there was a better idea and I didn't see it. And then the only component that's required is, will the studio write the check? Right. In this case, they did. And I'm eternally grateful to them. They could have said, no, we spent enough, see you later.
Right.
And they didn't. They wrote the check and I went and shot for 2.5 more days and made the movie a lot better, which gave me the opportunity to go direct again.
Right.
I don't think I would have had that opportunity without those reshoots.
Now at the end of that scene, there's that wonderful shot of his articles, the magazine covers that feature his articles.
Right.
Did you always know you were going to use that, or was that something that came up during production?
No, the idea there was, and this is, again, subtext, something that's going to happen that has nothing to do with what people are saying to each other. One of the goals of direction is, even in a movie as talky as Shattered Glass, and it's pretty talky, if you turned the sound off, would the movie still make sense? Would people be able to follow the subtext of the story, just based on behavior? And you're always trying to use the camera to capture subtext in that way. So in this particular scene, what I was thinking was, and I don't know that we ever achieved it, but the goal was, subtextually, Chuck Lane is starting to put that magazine back together. That he's physically going to be repairing the damage that Stephen Glass did by pulling articles out that Glass wrote, and then by putting things physically back on that wall.
Right.
And of course, that came from research too, because the Real New Republic has a wall of covers. They have the most recent 52 covers. And you see something like that and you extrapolate from there.
Right. So that was a way to get the subtext of the piece.
Absolutely.
On screen.
Sure. And also, again, God bless Hayden Christensen, because he walks in and he looks at that wall where his magazines used to be, and he sees they're not there anymore, and it adds to his level of panic, which is pretty substantial. But try it with bad actors. It seemed to have been horrible.
Right. How much of the story do you map out before you start writing a draft? Do you heavily outline? Or do you
Heavily.
Heavily?
I'm a
beat sheet or like a full treatment?
Well, for example, for 102 Minutes, it was an adaptation of a book.
Right, this is the nonfiction book based on the account of the survivors inside the Twin Towers and who got out and how they got out.
Best book I ever read. And that was a case where this was a job I had to have. Right. My agent called me one day and said, here's this book, you ought to take a look at it, but it's not coming to you exclusively. If you want this job, you're gonna have to go battle with some big time guys to get this job. And the second I read it, I said, okay, doesn't matter how hard I have to work, no one's gonna outwork me, I'm getting this job. And when I went in to pitch that story, I had a 38-page outline. I had every single scene of that movie laid out. And I remember very clearly saying to the guy who was the president of Sony, it was a 12 o'clock meeting, and I said to him, do you have a 1 o'clock lunch? And he said, I do. I said, I need you to call and push it because there's a lot of material here.
Right.
And I literally spoke for an hour and 15 minutes, which I would not recommend, by the way.
Right.
It's not standard fare.
Well, I was in the room, and you know, we were very impressed with the amount of research you had done. You did pitch the movie, and it was a very compelling pitch, and you had done more than your share of homework in preparing for that meeting. We were all very appreciative. But do you do a lot of research? And
Always.
for that in particular, it seemed like you had really immersed yourself in the facts of the day.
I had respect for the fact that there were other known writers who had better credits than mine who wanted that job too. And the goal was to try to make the studio feel that they'd be missing out if they hired anybody else, that nobody was going to dig like I was going to dig.
And that's how we felt.
Well, great. But the very happy side effect of that is when you go to write the screenplay, you've got a 38-page outline in front of you.
Right.
There are no surprises, and you can page budget in such a way that the writing of the script is a lot less agonizing than the laying out of that outline. I recommend it highly for writers. You could drive from Los Angeles to Baltimore without a map and probably get there.
Right.
But you'll go 2,000 miles out of your way.
Right. It'll take a long, long time.
A long time. If you have a straight line, you're going to get there faster.
Do you have rules for things like structure and pacing? Are you conscious of those things when you're writing?
I took a great class taught by Robert McKee, which is
the guy,
sort of a cliche in Hollywood. But I learned things in there that I use and apply on every script. And even if I'm breaking the rules, it's helpful to me to know what those rules are. The McKee class taught me a way of thinking about writing and thinking about structure that has never left me.
Right.
And I actually think, well, here's something that I tell young writers all the time. You cannot teach someone how to write. You can't give someone an ear for dialogue.
Right.
You can't give them a feel for characters. But there are 5 screenplays that I think all writers need to master. And if they can master those screenplays, they can at least understand structure. And for me, those 5 are Broadcast News, Rocky, Ordinary People, Kramer versus Kramer, and The Wizard of Oz. Now, I'm not saying those are the 5 greatest screenplays of all time, although I could make a case for any of them.
Yeah.
They're pretty stunning. But they all work on such different levels. Their structures are so different and so elegant. If you can understand what makes those 5 tick, you can structure a screenplay.
How did you know to study those 5?
Part of that came from McKee.
Okay.
Part of that came from that class. But you'd have to be pretty lame to see those movies and not understand that something pretty special is happening in terms of the development of those screenplays.
How the hell did Stallone nail that structure? Like, do you think he took a class, or was it just? Do you think it just popped
the
out?
legend of that is that he wrote that screenplay in 3 days,
Wow.
which is enough to make you just suicidal if you're a writer. It's a great script.
But those 5 do give you a crash course in clockwork structure.
Absolutely, and Rocky, for me, might have the most unique structure of all of them, because the first half hour of that movie is the subplot.
Right.
He doesn't get offered that fight until about a half hour in. And of course, totally significant, when going back to the idea of dilemma, when he's first offered the fight, he says no, which is hugely revealing about who that guy is.
Yeah.
And
he very humbly thinks it's for a sparring partner.
And he's going to be a sparring partner. And then, of course, great second act crisis at the end of Rocky. He takes that walk. He goes to the Spectrum where the fight's going to be, and he comes back home.
They have the boxing shorts wrong. It's a nice little detail. He goes, you got my shorts wrong.
Right, and the guy says it doesn't really matter, does it? And he realizes he's just a lamb being led to slaughter, and he gets into bed with Adrian, and he says, I can't beat him. I can't beat him.
You're so hooked by that point.
And she says, what are you going to do? And she helps him change his goal, which is no one's ever stood for 15 rounds with this guy. If that bell rings and I'm still standing, I'll know for the first time in my life that I'm not a loser.
But I'm not just another bum from the neighborhood.
Right. And you begin to realize the whole movie's been leading up to that point.
Right.
Pretty simple third act, which is, can he withstand that level of sacrifice or not?
But it pivoted in the right. It pivots that
just
screenplay.
Genius. It's such good writing. It's really amazing.
Do you find now that once you've absorbed these great examples, that you just know there's got to be certain things in the structure of my screenplay, and it comes out in your outline or whatever?
Well, what you're trying to do, again, is going back to that idea of putting as many dilemmas in front of your character as possible. Here's something that I don't think studios understand. When they call a writer and they say, we'd like to do a character polish. We think the script's really close. We want to do a character polish.
Right.
There are writers who make a living by coming in and having those characters just say something a little funnier,
right.
or they give them a Chicago Cubs hat or something like, hey, it's a character, he wears a Cubs hat. No, that's just a guy with a hat. If you want to find out who that character is, have someone take their Cub hat and run away.
Right, you got to give action.
And find out what do they do about it, you know? If someone took their Cub hat and ran away at the same time they were supposed to be at an important meeting, well then you find out who that person was.
Right.
The way you add character to a screenplay is by giving tough choices and seeing what that character does under pressure. And the thing about all those 5 that I named is that they all put their characters in horrible positions so that no matter what they decide, they're going to lose something huge. And that's how you find out who those people are under pressure. You know, movies are about that struggle.
Right. How important is the location of a scene to you when you're writing? Does it have special significance? Not so much, I guess if you're tied to real life events, it has to be in a certain place. When you're writing, you know, kind of free form, how much thought goes into where a scene takes place, and does it carry significance for you?
It carries a huge amount of weight, huge amount of weight. You can take a scene that's good and make it horrible by putting it in the wrong place. You can take a scene that's really average and make it interesting by putting it in the right place. Try to put the scene where, first of all, it has to be somewhere believable. You know, it's great to shoot a scene on a mountaintop, but if you don't believe that the 2 characters would be there, then the whole time that you're working on the scene, the people who are watching the movie are thinking, what the hell's going on here? So it has to be somewhere that's credible.
Right.
But it should be somewhere that has significance to the characters that are in that scene. You know, archetypal settings can go a long way.
Right.
They can become cliche. You know, putting a scene in a church or a courtroom can be really dangerous stuff.
Right.
But putting a scene in a location that puts your characters under pressure makes them react, and that's always a good thing.
And how do you? What's your process for dialogue? How do you develop the voice for a character?
Boy, that's just a lot of rewriting.
Right.
That's just draft after draft after draft, and then when you sit down and you hear actors read it,
it's a whole new thing.
A whole new thing. Whether you're the writer or the writer-director, you've got to be around those actors and you've got to hear their rhythms and rewrite for them. And if there's something that just doesn't make sense to them, even if you think it's a really, you know, spiffy line, you got to change it. Absolutely, because they're just not going to do it justice.
Right. What's the biggest difference between being a writer and now a writer-director?
Well, the biggest difference is when you're on the set of a movie and you're the writer, and you say, gee, I love apple juice. They say, well, there's a 7-Eleven right down the street. And when you're the director and you say you like apple juice, you hear these walkie-talkies clicking all up and down the stage.
Trucks are backing
up.
up.
I mean, they can't get it to you fast enough, which, you know, does illustrate something.
Right.
I think the biggest difference between being a writer and being a writer-director is that when you're a writer, you care and you're invested, absolutely. But there is a grown-up who's above you, who is the ultimate arbiter of what's going to go in the movie and what's not going to go in the movie. And even though that can be frustrating, it also takes the pressure off you to a certain degree. When you're the writer-director, you are the grown-up. It doesn't mean you're not getting notes from people, because you're getting notes all the time. And if you're smart, you're going to listen to those notes. But it does mean that ultimately, it's your call.
And you're more of the grown-up because you're wearing 2 hats. It's not like you're a director who can summon the writer to fix something.
Absolutely, and there were days on Shattered Glass where the director and me thought that the writer should be fired. And there were days when the writer and me thought, who the hell is directing this movie, because that guy's an idiot.
Did you ever think about calling in a writer to alleviate the burden?
Never.
Okay.
Never. I have a lot more confidence in myself as a writer than I do as a director, and I think I'll always think of myself not as a director, but as a writer who occasionally directs. And I think there's a difference. You know, when I think of like guys who are directors, you know, Sidney Lumet was a director, or is a director. Bob Fosse was a director. Coppola, Spielberg, those guys are directors. They can take someone else's material and breathe life into it. I can just sort of interpret something that I've written and hopefully get out of its way.
Do you ever find inspiration in just the world around you, or people, places, and things, that kind of thing, when you're not writing something that's a true story?
Sure. I mean, you know, you're trying to capture a behavior. And you see it all over the place, and I'll take it from anywhere.
We're going to hit you with some behavior. I hope you take it. It's from us at Frederick. Can I have the tray? This is our screenwriting exercise. We call it the object. Frederick here has an object in that tray, unknown to you, obviously, random to you.
Very much so.
Chosen by us. The object here of the object is for you to tell me a story based on the object and
Sure.
what you think of it. I'll hear the story, and then afterwards I'll ask you why that story.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Show the man his object.
Your object, sir.
Boy, I had really hoped that this would not be the object. I'm going to try not to get misty.
It does suggest lost dreams or something.
When I was in 8th grade, I was 13, and I had a teacher that I was crazy about, a history teacher. And I genuinely loved this woman. I mean, she was really special. And, I was 13 and bright, but not terribly worldly. And I wanted to give her something. I wanted to offer her, a token of my affection. And it wasn't a sexual thing. I think people read it that way and misread it, actually. Right. It was not like a Mary Kay Letourneau thing. Right. I just really thought she was great and an arresting personality. And anyway, so, I had an allowance, and I saved up, and I got a turquoise ring, because turquoise was sort of a big deal in 1976. and I put it in this box, and I stupidly told my family I'm going to give my history teacher this turquoise ring. And so I, wrapped it and took it to school and presented it to her. But my sister, who was 16, to torture me, had taken the ring out of the box. Cool. So I went like that, and there was nothing in it.
Oh.
And my history teacher moved to Houston.
Now, what made you tell the story in the first person? Is it easier to do that?
It never occurred to me to tell it any other way.
Right.
There's a line in the movie that I'm editing right now called Breach, where Chris Cooper says that the most convincing lies are always rooted in some kind of truth.
Right. I think Hitler said that too. Where the bigger the lie, the more people would believe it.
Sure.
Or was one of those wacky guys.
One of those guys.
Goebbels.
So I knew I was going to have to come up with something, and I thought I should root it in some kind of truth. And the truth is that when I was 13, I did love my history teacher.
Well, you picked the wrong era, because now they're banging everybody. Teachers just there's one a week.
That was really not what I was looking for.
Right.
But I felt that I could sell it convincingly, because there was a lot in there that was true.
You did. I thought it was a real life recollection.
Oh, good. Mm-hmm. There's another. Not that I'm pimping the movie Breach, but there's another thing that we do. It's kind of a runner in that movie. When Chris Cooper first walks into the office where Ryan Phillips is going to be working for him, the first thing he ever says to that character is, tell me 5 things about yourself, 4 of them true. It's a lie detection game.
Right.
And it puts Ryan Phillips on the spot immediately, because he's got to come up with 5 things about himself, and 4 of them have to be true.
It sounds like an acting exercise almost.
It's a great acting exercise. I learned it at a dinner party once and knew that I would put it in a movie. And did, and I think it works pretty effectively.
It's a fine line between lying and acting, huh?
Yeah, it is. At this dinner party, my wife was there, and she knows me pretty well and has known me for a long time. So when it came my turn, I had to list these things about myself that were true, and then I had to come up with one that wasn't. And it was a huge achievement for me that she didn't know the difference.
So it's 4 true, 1 lie.
Yeah, at the dinner party, it was 2 true, 1 lie.
So you can vary it up a little bit.
Yes, I varied it because I thought it would sound better in the movie if it were 4 and 5.